Hi friends, we are back again with Foster Care Friday. This week I'm going to do another educational video. I wanted to talk this week about how trauma affects brain development in children. So we all have heard that children in foster care tend to have behaviors, but it really helps in understanding what's going on with their brain to help understanding why they're having the behaviors that they're having. So this is an incredibly expansive topic. There's so much information on it. We could talk for hours and hours and days and days and days. So I'm going to try to super simplify it and just bring up the pieces of information that I think are kind of the biggest that will help in understanding these children's behaviors the most. If you want more information on it, I like Karen Purvis with the Karen Purvis Institute. She's also written several books, including The Connected Child, that discuss this, and you can do trainings through her academy. So we will talk about brain chemistry a little bit, and if you're interested in learning about that, then stick around. But first, if you are new here, my name is Anna Leonora, and together with my husband Jason, we are foster parents in real life, and here on my channel, From the Fosters, we do foster parenting life together and raise awareness for the foster care system. So if any of that interests you, please consider subscribing to my channel down below, and you can hit your post notification bell while you're down there so that you won't miss when I post any new videos like this, and so you can join my growing family here on YouTube. All right. Feels good to do my introduction again since last week I had my husband do it. Anyway, brain chemistry. So children's brains, our brains as humans, adults, people, does the most of its most rapid development and the majority of its development up until the age of 8 years old. So we know that the brain continues to grow and develop into our early to mid 20s. But the bulk of the development and the most rapid development occur up until the age of 8 years old. So those first years of our lives are incredibly formative when it comes to how our brain is wired, right? So the big pieces of how trauma affects the brain that I think are the most critical to understand as a foster parent or an adoptive parent, a parent of a child who's been through significant trauma, is understanding two key concepts. The first one I'm going to talk about is the amygdala, which is the fight or flight center of the brain. It's the part of the brain that handles those primitive responses to stressors, okay? Every human brain, or pretty much every human brain, has an amygdala. And I say pretty much every human brain because there are people born with parts of their brain missing, and various different congenital defects and abnormalities. So I say most people have an amygdala, but there's always room for a couple abnormalities here and there. But the typical human brain has an amygdala, which handles the primitive responses of fight, flight, or freeze, okay? As a young child, if you are exposed to repeated chronic trauma, abuse, neglect at the hands of the people who are supposed to be your caregivers, your safety keepers, the people you are supposed to trust, you live in a constant state of fight, flight, or freeze, right? Think of a child who is constantly being physically abused. That body and brain are constantly in fight, flight, or freeze mode for self-preservation. So the amygdala in a child's brain of a child who has endured this is larger, develops larger than in a brain of someone who did not experience this repeated chronic abuse and neglect as a child. I'm not talking about being spanked once or twice or occasionally by your parents. I'm not talking about being yelled at by your parents for breaking their favorite china or whatever. I'm talking about repeated chronic abuse and neglect. Okay? Brain MRI scans of these children have shown a larger amygdala. What that means is this fight, flight, or freeze response takes up more space in their brain than in other individuals, okay? That means that things that maybe would not trigger other people can seem like giant triggers to these children. So they may have a much bigger response to things that we view as small inconveniences or small issues. They make it seem like the world is ending. That is not their fault. That is their brain telling them you need to fight, run, or freeze to whatever that trigger is. The other important thing to remember is that when children are in fight, flight, or freeze mode, they only comprehend up to 3 words that you say. So you trying to lecture a child, overly discipline a child, explain something to a child while they're in fight, flight, or freeze mode, they're not going to comprehend anything you're saying. It's going in one ear and out the other because they can only understand up to 3 words. So as a caregiver, it is our responsibility to recognize when they're in fight, flight, or freeze mode, not berate them for being in that mode over something small, but, relating to them, understanding, I see that you are feeling very anxious over this. What can we do to calm down? Teach them coping mechanisms that are healthier coping mechanisms than hitting you or running and hiding or whatever they're doing. Teach them deep breathing, whatever you have to do to get them out of it. And then once they are out of that mode, then you can have a conversation with them. But trying to punish them, explain to them why something shouldn't be as big of a deal as they're making it, or any of that while they're in that mode, it's not going to work. It's just not going to work. So getting them out of that mode in a healthy, socially acceptable manner, and just getting them regulated, then educating. Okay, so that's the first big one. The second big one that I want to talk about is the corpus callosum, which not as many people have heard about the corpus callosum. Most people have heard about the amygdala. Not as many people have heard about the corpus callosum, but it is the structure in the brain that connects the right and left hemispheres. Okay, most people are born with a corpus callosum, and I say that again because there are people who are born without a corpus callosum, and they have their own varying degrees of affectedness by that. But yeah, so the corpus callosum is the structure that connects the right and left hemispheres of your brain, okay? They allow you to receive, comprehend, and then transmute information, right? Across the hemispheres. So in children who have repeated trauma, abuse, neglect, whatever, they're finding on MRI studies that their corpus callosum is thickened. What it means by it being thickened is that their processing time is slower, okay? There's theories about why that happens in the brain, having to do with protecting oneself. So the brain develops this thickened corpus callosum so that while a child is being subjected to said abuse or neglect, it's not processing as quickly through their brain, so they can kind of shut down and protect themselves while it's happening. That's kind of a theory, though, about why it forms thickened in these children, but MRI studies have shown that it is thickened oftentimes in these children. What that means for behaviors is that they are not always going to understand an instruction that you give them as quickly as a child who doesn't have the thickened corpus callosum. So, example, if my kid is jumping on his bed and I tell him to stop jumping on his bed, in a child without the thickened corpus callosum, you would expect them to stop almost immediately, right? But in the brain of a child with a thickened corpus callosum, it may take a couple seconds to even a minute or so for that child to process that command. So what that looks like for me as the caregiver is I say, hey, buddy, stop jumping on your bed. You could get hurt. He may keep jumping on his bed several more times. That's going to look to me like the caregiver, like defiance. But if I start disciplining them for that and it just hasn't computed yet, that's not fair to that child, right? So the important thing for a caregiver is when you give a child an instruction, like, hey, buddy, stop jumping on the bed. Sometimes you have to give them a couple seconds to a minute to really comprehend what you're asking of them. Another way that we can help children receive things a little bit faster is sometimes when you touch a child while you're giving them an instruction, it forces the two hemispheres of the brain to speak to each other. So sometimes that can speed up recognition of a command. So maybe if I went up to him and put my hand on his shoulder, hey buddy, I really don't want you jumping on the bed. It's dangerous. Can you please stop? I don't want you to get hurt. He might understand that a little bit faster and a little bit easier than if I don't touch him. So same at schools, like you may have your teacher put their hand lightly on a child's shoulder and say, hey, we're done with this activity. We're going on to the next. Please put your pencil down, or whatever it is. These are the two biggest pieces that I struggle with in parenting children of trauma, because these are the things that as we were raised, my parents didn't give me any time after giving me a command. If they told me to stop, I am to stop then and there. So that's what we expect as parents. But, or like if I had a giant overreaction to something small, you know, and this is not against my parents. Gosh, this sounds so bad. I'm just trying to give examples here. Don't come at my parents. They were great parents, are great parents. These are just examples. But let's say a parent were to say, oh my gosh, why are you screaming and crying over that? That's no big deal. Knock it off, right? These are the sorts of things that we're used to in parenting children not of trauma, right? But if we do those things to children of trauma, we stand to further harm them or further perpetuate those pathways and brain function that they already have. What we want to do instead is to help heal the brain and rewire the brain, restructure the brain, which we can do, but it takes time. It does not happen overnight. It takes time. It takes a lot of consistency. It takes a lot of repeating the same behaviors over and over again. And that's really what we're working towards, is better coping mechanisms, not needing to feel like they're in fight or flight so often, being able to feel comfortable and safe in their environment, in their skin, with the people they're around. And that takes time. But you're not going to get there if you don't understand these key pieces of how the brain is changed by the trauma they've endured. So, recap, remembering that they go into fight, flight, or freeze mode way easier and quicker than other children. Understanding that if they're in fight, flight, or freeze mode, they're only going to understand up to 3 words. So trying to explain things to them, get them to change their behavior, whatever, it's not going to work while they're in that mode. So the best thing you can do is be there for them and try to help them calm down out of it by teaching them deep breathing, saying, I'm here with you. If you need anything, let me know. Otherwise, I'm just going to sit here, whatever you need. You know, those sort of supportive measures. And then when they come out of it, talking to them about it. So remembering those about the amygdala. And then about the corpus callosum, just understanding that their comprehension is going to be slower, right? So giving them an instruction, if they continue to do the behavior you've asked them to stop, not getting mad right away, giving it a minute, letting it process. If it doesn't seem like it's processed, try putting your hand on their shoulder and saying it again. But just being supportive and encouraging and understanding that they did not form the way their brain is wired. You didn't form the way your brain was wired. It happened due to your surroundings, your upbringing, right? So their brain was formed to keep them safe in their surroundings with their type of upbringing, which may have been very different than yours. and understanding that because they can't control their brain like that, there's going to be differences in how we have to parent them, and we have to be patient and not punish them for things that they have no control over. And the more we give them time and the more support we give them, the more coping mechanisms we teach them, the more we meet them where they're at, the easier it can be for their brain to start to form new pathways and new connections and start to mold itself more towards a normal brain. I mean, I don't really want to say normal, but what we would typically see in a child who was brought up in a safe, stable, loving environment. But it doesn't happen overnight. It takes a long time. And I can tell you with our personal experiences, we've had our older foster son, Casper, for over a year now, like a year and a month almost. And we didn't start to see big changes in him until recently, like within the last month. So this whole year, we have had to be very patient because he was a little bit older. He was 4, and his brain was made the way his brain was made. And we have had to work very hard. We've had to have a lot of patience. We've had to teach him coping techniques. And over this last month, we've seen a really big change, but we went a whole year without seeing a ton of change. So you just have to be patient. You have to be understanding. There's so much more that goes into it. There's so much information out there, but these were kind of the big pieces that once I understood them, they made my parenting of my foster children so much easier on me and so much better. So I just wanted to share those 2 biggies. But again, if you're interested in learning more, check out Empowered to Connect. Check out the Karen Purvis Institute. Check out the book, The Connected Child by Karen Purvis. There's a lot of information and there's so much you can learn. But those are kind of the biggies, and I hope they help. If you're an adoptive parent, a foster parent, if you are a kinship parent and you are parenting children, or if you're a teacher, or a daycare worker, and you are working with children of trauma or raising children of trauma, these things are so important to remember. So I hope that helps. Thank you for spending a little bit of time on your Friday with me. Also, you guys, we're at like almost 500 subscribers. What? Like, we're right there. We're so close. Like, by next week, we probably will have 500 subscribers. That is insane to me. So thank you to everyone who has subscribed and who is joining our growing YouTube family and following along this journey with us. If you are looking at becoming a foster parent, or you know someone looking at becoming a foster parent, or you just want to learn more about foster parenting and the foster care system, please like this video, subscribe to my channel down below, hit your post notification bell so that you won't miss when I post any new videos like this. And otherwise, you guys, until next week, I hope you go out and continue to shine your light into the world. Bye.